Hello, welcome to the Black Ponder. I'm Neil Trotter. Today, we're going to be talking about the philosophy behind the Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Now, the Brothers Karamazov is considered Dostoyevsky's magnum opus, right? His greatest work. It's interesting because that it is also his last work, and he died like only a few weeks later after writing this work. He actually wanted to continue with this, which is pretty impressive because this is a ginormous book. This edition alone is almost 1,000 pages. It's a log thing, although the way it ended, it does seem like you could continue on with the story. Now, in terms of the novelization of this, just it being a novel, I would say that for me personally, this was amazing. This was I was highly entertaining, very enjoyable, and I have to say Dostoyevsky is probably my favorite author from what I've read so far, because he really hits a lot of my personal style, what I find personally intriguing. Is this a perfect novel? Definitely wouldn't say that. I mean, it's a perfect novel for me, for my personal bias and interests, but it isn't a perfect novel. Some of the flaws, what I would say, is Dostoevsky in general, but particularly in this book, there's some very self-righteous characters, meaning there's a lot of characters that go off on huge monologues and talk off of their moral base and what they believe in and things like that. And I know a lot of people won't really be into that. And, you know, just the fact that it's a long book, right? It's almost 1,000 pages, like I said. Does it really need to be that long? I mean, could he have left some things out and made a little bit more condensed, a little bit more readable for the general audience? He could have. He could have. It tends to kind of go on and on and on and on in cases when it doesn't really have to. So, but for me, I kind of like that personally. I do like it when, I'm the type of person that's like, well, look, I paid for the book. Give me as much as possible. You know, the longer the better. You know, give me my money's worth. So I mean, that's just me. But I know a lot of people wouldn't be into that. So I would not say it's a perfect novel. It's a really good one, though. I mean, you should definitely check it out if you're into just like a really good story. You should check it out. But what I like more about this book is that it's an existential masterpiece. It really is, when it really boils down to it. Now, according to famous existentialist John Paul Sartre, right, he said there was two different kinds of existentialism, and I agree with that for the most part. There's Christian existentialism, and then there's basically atheistic existentialism. And what are these two things, really? I mean, what is existentialism? A lot of people say, well, it's not really any definable thing, really. It's just a bunch of philosophers grouped together, and it's a very loose term. But I feel that existentialism is an examination on the human experience, a philosophical look at that human experience. And existentialism, I think, doesn't really focus so much on trying to answer questions as it does just addressing dilemmas and addressing the experiences that we deal with, that human beings deal with in life on a philosophical level. You know, and so Christian existentialism focuses on the dilemmas that humans have to deal with the existence of God, right? It doesn't, Christian existentialism doesn't try to prove the existence of God. It doesn't try and argue that God exists because this, that, and the other thing. I mean, sometimes it kind of does, but not really. You know, and we'll get to that. Whereas existentialism that does not acknowledge God's existence, like John Paul Sartre, Friedrich Nietzsche, they focus on, okay, assuming that God does not exist, or I think that God does not exist, so these are the issues that we have to deal with. How do we come to terms with these issues, right? But Christian existentialists like Fyodor Dostoyevsky, he focuses on, okay, the fact that God exists and we live in this world, what are these issues that we have to deal with? Let's examine these issues. Let's look at these issues in a philosophical level. And I think the Brothers Karamazov really does a spectacular job doing just that. There's a lot of things you struggle with as a Christian that kind of rock your faith, And should I, you come to terms with, well, should I really be a Christian when this stuff is happening, or I'm dealing with this, and how does God play into all that? And rather than try and pose theological arguments, it just focuses on the struggle itself. Does it really recommend any type of thing that you should or should not do? No, it just focuses on the experience. I think that's what existentialism really boils down to. So let's get into some quotes. Let's get into some quotes right now. If you're looking for a review of the novel, the storyline of the Brothers Karamazov, you're not gonna get it here. This is a philosophy channel, right? We focus on philosophy. I'm just gonna be talking about the philosophy behind the book, and I'm gonna be talking about an overall philosophical idea or concept that I feel is present throughout the whole book. I mean, there are a lot of philosophy topics and concepts and ideas talked about in the Brothers Karamazov. That's what makes it so great. But I'm going to talk about this one in particular that I think is essential and really just deals with all aspects of the book. So let's get to that quote. So to give you some context on where this quote is coming from, it's the story is about three brothers, the Brothers Karamazov. The youngest brother is Alyosha, and he's talking to his brother Ivan. Ivan is actually my favorite character because what he offers to the table, the philosophical table, is pretty interesting, I think. Now, Alyosha, he spends a lot of time at the monastery. He's really religious. He's really into God. His brother Ivan, however, is not so much into God. Ivan's he dwells more in the mind. He's more of an intellectual. Alyosha's more in spiritual. Ivan's more intellectual, mental. And they have this discussion. Let me share with you what Ivan says. If God exists, and if he really did create the earth, then, as common knowledge tells us, he created it according to Euclidean geometry, while he created the human mind with an awareness of only 3 spatial dimensions. Even so, there have been, and still are even today, geometers and philosophers of the most remarkable kind who doubt that the entire universe, or even more broadly, the entirety of being, was created solely according to Euclidean geometry, and who even make so bold as to dream that the 2 parallel lines, which according to Euclid can on no account converge upon Earth, may yet do so somewhere in infinity. And so, my lad, I've decided that if I can't even understand that, then how am I to understand about God? I meekly confess that I do not possess the faculties needed to solve such questions. The mind I have is a Euclidean, earthbound one. And so how are we to make inferences about that which is not of this world? And indeed, I advise you never to think about that, Alyosha, and least of all concerning God and whether he exists or not. Those are all questions unsuited to a mind that has been created with an awareness of only 3 dimensions. This is a very big Christian existentialistic idea, right? The fact that it's impossible for a human person to really understand everything, the complete and entire reality of existence. And that's what makes room for God, right? God is in control of the things that are beyond our comprehension, and that the fact that there are things that are happening that are beyond our comprehension, things that which we can never understand, we struggle with this. We struggle with this, and that's like an assumption that you have to make if you're like, okay, I'm into this Christian existentialism. This is the assumption that I'm unable to understand everything. The things in particularly I'm not able to understand, that's the realm of God, and I'm not even gonna try and prove or disprove or anything else, because that's just something beyond my comprehension. Now, of course, not every philosopher or scientist accepts that. Of course, there's different perspectives on that regard. But in terms of just the Christian existentialistic perspective, that's a common proposition, right? So let's keep going with Ivan. He's talking with his brother Alyosha. It isn't God I don't accept, you see. It's the world created by him, the world of God. I don't accept and cannot agree to accept. Let me qualify that. Like a young babe, I am convinced that our sufferings will be healed and smoothed away, and that the whole offensive comedy of human conflict will disappear like a pathetic mirage. like the infamous fabrication of Euclidean human mind, as weak and undersized as an atom, and that ultimately, during the universal finale, at the moment of eternal harmony, there will occur and become manifest something so precious that it will be sufficient for all hearts, for the soothing of all indignation, the redemption of all men's evil doing. All the blood that has been shed by them will be sufficient not only to make it possible to forgive, but even to justify all the things that have happened to men. And even if all of it, makes itself manifest and becomes reality, I will not accept it. I do not want to accept it. Even if the parallel lines converge and actually witness it, I shall witness it and say they have converged. But all the same, I shall not accept it. That is my essence, Alyosha. That is my thesis. So that right there we have a difference between atheism and really agnosticism, right? This is what Ivan's talking about is a typical agnostic position. Now, not all agnostics think like that, but a lot of them do. A lot of them that I know have. And an agnostic person is somebody, if you didn't know, somebody who believes that some supreme being exists, of some sort of higher order person, some creator of some type, but that this person isn't really a Christian God or any God of any organized religion that humans made. Is some sort of being that doesn't, just lets things happen, doesn't really care about what's really going on in human existence and things like that. I know people who believe that, like, oh yeah, I know there probably is some sort of creator or something like that, but he doesn't. This person probably doesn't care about human lives at all, because I mean, if you just look at the earth and see what's going on in terms of how people suffer and things like that, how could that be possible that there's somebody that could just sit there and allow that to happen, allow all the suffering to take place? And a lot of people see the suffering in the world, and that's for them is proof that there is no Christian version of God. But they still do believe, like, well, it makes sense to me that there's some sort of supreme being, right? Now, Ivan takes it a step further, though, because he's not even looking at the logic behind it. He's more emotionally invested in it. He's even like angry. You say, like, look at this. Look at all the suffering. You're telling me you're going to accept a God that allows this kind of suffering to happen? No, I don't accept that. For him, it's not so much of a logical argument, although he does bring that to the table. It's more of a, like, how that's a preposterous, how dare that argument even be proposed? Like, you accept me to believe that God actually cares when all this suffering is happening? Give me a break. And he continues on that whole idea, because after that he starts going into details about news articles that he collects that delve into human suffering, that report on a lot of atrocious things that are happening. What he particularly focuses on, though, is the stories about children suffering. What he says is that, listen, children are innocent. They're young minds. They've done nothing to deserve the things that happen to them. And he just goes on and talks about these stories, these really explicit, horrible stories about these children that are suffering from, physical abuse, parents neglecting them, all types of horrible stories of children suffering. And I mean, it really gets into some deep detail on it. And it gets very emotional and disturbing, right? I mean, he's trying to really hit it home. Now, these are news stories, particularly in this novel, right? They're not the specific ones he's talking about. They haven't actually happened. But we all know, like all of us know that, children in particular suffer all the time, like in the world, right? If you're talking about war-torn countries and third world situations where children are like going through horrible things, right? Or even in first world countries where you see like a lot of parental abuse, parental neglect, children getting domestically, sexually abused, things like that. I mean, all about, we both know all that's happening, right? And even just, I mean, if you don't even think about children, just people in general are just suffering. All types of things are happening to people in terms of suffering. But Ivan particularly focuses on children to get that message across. People are suffering for seemingly no reason, right? I mean, these are innocent children and they're going through these horrendous situations. And you're telling me that there's a God in heaven who cares about human beings? This is Ivan's position. He's really trying to push Alyosha, right? I do not want harmony out of a love of mankind. I do not want it. I want rather to be left with suffering that are unavenged. Let me rather remain with my unavenged suffering and unassuaged indignation, even though I am not right. And in any case, harmony has been overestimated in value. We really don't have the money to pay so much to get in. And so I hasten to return my entry ticket. And if I am at all an honest man, I am obliged to return it as soon as possible. That is what I am doing. It isn't God I don't accept, Alyosha. It's just his ticket, and that I most respectfully return to him. When he refers to this ticket, he's talking about Christian belief that Jesus Christ died to save your sins, and the only way to be with God, to go to heaven, is to believe in Christ because he sacrificed himself for us. All right, and Ivan's like, well, I don't want it, I'd rather suffer in hell than to accept this world that you've created, where you allow people to suffer, this whole world where you created a situation where you had to give up your son, and your son had to suffer and die and get crucified and all that. Like, why did you even create this situation? I don't even want to take part of this system, period. This whole creation that you call great, when you see all this sufferings happening in the world. Take it back. I don't want it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is Ivan's argument. I'm wrong, but there it is right there. The key point is that he is acknowledging the existence of God, but he is rejecting it. Right? That's the key issue here. What's important to understand here is that this is one of those existential crises that happen in Christianity. You believe in God and you're told that God loves you and this and that and other thing, but when you actually start going out into the world and applying human logic and reason to the world reality that you're able to comprehend, you're kind of at a loss. You have to come to terms with this fact that people are suffering all the time. Some deserve it, a lot don't. And how could this be the case? And so as a Christian, you have to come to terms with this. Well, you study the Bible, you go to church, you listen to pastors, ministers, you reflect on it, you pray on it, but you're constantly in struggle with this. I mean, this is a real issue that as a Christian, you have to deal with. The fact that there's suffering in the world, yet there's still a God that cares and loves you, right? Unconditionally. How is that possible? What sense does this make? And that's a real struggle as a Christian that you have to deal with. And in this book, The Brothers Karamazov, Dostoyevsky really centers in on that existential struggle, which is why I feel it's a really powerful book. You got people in this book that are dealing with that, yet they're still religious. But then you got other people who are dealing with that reality and saying no, I'm gonna reject that, because I don't accept it. And it really is focusing on the struggle of that, coming to terms with a material world filled with suffering. Yet there's a God in heaven that loves you unconditionally. How do I come to terms with that? What sense does that make? How do I make sense out of that? So how does his little brother Alyosha take this? He really doesn't have much to say to that. One might be reading this and be expecting some sort of counter. Okay, I'm ready for that counter. Show me, give me the moral of the story. Give me the message. All right, tell me, the world's suffering, yet God loves you because, bam, give it to me. Dostoyevsky doesn't do that, right? He doesn't give you that. Alyosha is wow, you made me really sad. I still believe in God. I mean, there's no question about that. And I still accept that he loves me unconditionally, but yeah, man, that you're really bringing me down, Ivan. Why are you doing that to me? So he's not even really arguing against him. He's just saying well, I still accept God as a person of love and compassion and ultimate kindness, whether you believe it or not. But Ivan's telling him well, you go ahead and do that, you fool. I'm gonna do what I'm doing, and for the heck with that, this is my power. Later on in the book, I feel that this issue is addressed. Now, is there like an answer, like an ultimate answer, like, oh, okay, now I'm convinced? No. But I think there's a strong suggestion. So Alyosha has a mentor in this story, an elder of a monastery. And the reason why Alyosha is so religious is because he respects his elder, who is also incredibly religious, right? And he has some ideas that he shares in the book. Let me show you this quote that the elder talks about. Much upon earth is concealed from us, but in recompense, for that we have been gifted with a mysterious, sacred sense of our living connections with another world, with the celestial and higher world. And indeed, the roots of our thoughts and emotions are not here, but in other worlds. That is why the philosophers say that it is impossible to grasp the essence of things upon earth. God took seeds from other worlds and sowed them upon this earth, and cultivated his garden, and all that could come up. Did so, but that which has grown lives and has its life only in the sense of a mystery, contiguity with other worlds. And if that sense weakens or is destroyed in you, then what has grown dies within you. Then you become indifferent to life and even conceive a hatred of it. Thus do I think. That's a very powerful quote, because what he's saying is that, looking at it from a Christian perspective, the creation of the world involved the combination of the physical and metaphysical. Therefore, you're going to have to deal with mystery, a paradox, right? Things that you're not going to be able to understand, contradictions, because is a merging between the metaphysical and the physical, the spirit, the soul, the spiritual self, right? That's what he's getting at. And if you can't come to terms with that mystery, if you're unable to deal with that, then what's going to happen is that you're going to be destroyed within yourself. You're going to be filled with hatred and rage and other things like that. And he's addressing people like Ivan. Listen to this quote, which I think is even more powerful. Bear in mind particularly that you can be no man's judge, for a criminal can have no judge upon the earth until that judge himself has perceived that he is every bit as much a criminal as the man who stands before him, and that for the crime of the man who stands before him, he himself may well be more guilty than anyone else. Only when he grasps this may he become a judge. However insane that sounds, it is true. Ye without sin cast the first stone, right? This is a very important Christian concept, right? No person can judge anyone else, because ultimately everybody is in the same struggle metaphysically. And once you start to accept that, then you'll be able to start to deal with the suffering that happens in the world. Now, I know a lot of people can't accept that, and they will not accept that, and that's just the way it is. Some people could accept that, some people cannot. But in terms of the Christian way of being, that's something that is crucial to being a Christian. No person can judge another person. That's not possible in the Christian concept, because it goes back to the whole thing that there are just things that happen that are beyond our comprehension. Let me ask you a question. How many people who are Christian, how many of those people actually believe that, or actually accept that no person can judge another person? No matter what that person is doing, no person can judge another person. How many Christians actually truly live by that? And I would say not too many, right? And there's a lot of discrimination in the world, and a lot of oppression, and a lot of it has to do with that, with the fact that there are people constantly judging other people. And I think it all goes back to what Ivan is saying, and he's in a position that he is being a judge. He's like, look, I see the world this way, and I'm capable of judging because of my intellect. But in terms of the Christian point of view, no, you're not in a position to do that. And if you try to do that, yeah, you are going to be filled with hatred, and you're going to start to be angry. But you're not a judge, because you're unable to comprehend the complete reality of existence. You're just unable to comprehend that. So you can't really be a judge. That's what you're doing. That's why you're dealing with this conflict. it's definitely something to come to terms with. It is difficult. It is definitely a Christian struggle. And this book focuses on that. It focuses on the fact that there's things that are happening that are seemingly beyond the control of people. When we accept that God exists, then we have to come to terms with, okay, then why are these things happening? What does that mean that God exists yet all these things are still happening in the world? How is that good? How does that fit in God's ultimate great plan? Right? There's not really any answers, but there's a lot of addressing to that struggle. And if you would like to read about that, then I recommend the Brothers Karamazov. And I have to say, like, the person that recommended me this book, a viewer, I think his name is Rather Not Say, he said, hey, you should check this book out. I read it like an abridged version a while ago, but I never read the whole thing. I never really got into it. But I'll tell you something, this is a Christian existentialistic masterpiece. It is. So I just want to thank Rather Not Say for recommending me this book. It is a great story behind the book as well. I mean, it's a lot of, to be quite honest, it is a soap opera. I mean, it's got a lot of masterpiece theater type of Downton Abbey saga and drama in it, to be quite honest with you. But mixed with that, it also has a ton of philosophy. So if you're into that sort of thing, check out Fyodor Dostoyevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. Well, this is The Black Ponder. I'm Neil Trotter. Thanks for watching. Tune in next time for more philosophical thought.